Hey guys, welcome back to the Cool Classic Kids Show, and today we're talking about Sega because they are, in my opinion, making a very, very grave mistake. And honestly, this pisses me off very much. In regards to Sega and how they are choosing to release the Western versions of their games, specifically in regards to localization, translations, and whatnot, they're making a very grave mistake. And I, as someone who will be playing Persona 3 in just a few short days, because nicely enough, I was gifted the game. Shout out to the individual that did so. And this is a game I've been looking forward to for a while because I didn't want to play the PlayStation Portable version of Persona 3 because that is a very gimped version for the PSP back in the day. Didn't want to play that. I wanted to play essentially the remake, and unfortunately, I may run into an issue where I'm not getting the authentic version of the game just because, well, I don't live in Japan and I can't read Japanese and don't understand Japanese. But to get into the details here, guys, from Sega's official Twitter page, they put out, "Do you know about game localization, which translates games appropriately based on each country's language and culture? I was interviewed for localization from Japan to the world, how to translate a game, the Japan Times," and we're going to read this article right here. And in my personal opinion, it should say how to not translate a game. But let us continue. "Behind the global success of Japanese video games lies a delicate task, appealing to overseas players whose expectations on issues such as sexism are increasingly influencing the content of major titles." And what really bothers me instantaneously, besides the obvious, is when they say the task of appealing to overseas players. Guys, when I play a game that happens to be from a Japanese developer, I don't want them to appeal to me. I want to see what their vision is. I want to experience their culture, how they see things. I want the Japanese experience. And for me personally, I do prefer dub because I do like to experience games in my language. That's just how it is for me personally. But I want a very authentically dubbed version of the game as closely as possible. Now, Japanese and English aren't one to one, but I want as closely as humanly possible a proper translation from Japanese to English so that I can get the true context of everything going on. I don't need the game to appeal to me just because I live in the West. I just want the fact that I'm reaching out to you in Japan seeking your entertainment. It means that you are appealing to me because I could just get something that is, well, from America or from the West and have that experience. But no, I forfeit that desire because I want the Japanese experience. That is what appeals to me. The whole thought process of, well, I live here, so this no doubt appeals to me, completely, 100%. That thought process, I think, is genuinely ignorant. But because I do feel as though everyone is different. Doesn't, everyone has their likes, and there's some people that I know that only play Japanese video games that happen to live out here in America, and that's their bag, and that's awesome. So to, just assume that we want your games to appeal to us is very careless and ignorant to the reason why Japanese video games very heavily appeal to a certain demographic in the US, specifically speaking. But unfortunately, they are immediately discussing the political nonsense that happens in the West, in America, and bringing up sexism. And, when I play video games, I don't really care about sexism. If it's present, then so be it, if as long as it falls into the story and makes sense. I mean, the whole point of a story is to have good guys and bad guys. If a bad guy, for example, is a sexist piece of shit, that makes complete total sense. They're not a good person, right? So for this to be a thing is just ridiculous to me. The fact that they actually think this way. But they continue, "With the majority of sales for big games now outside Japan, everything from slang words to characters' costumes must be carefully considered for a global audience. Oh my god, dude. They're completely missing the point entirely. And for a while, we were, I was aware that, a lot of the sales for games and just Japanese entertainment has grown outside of Japan. Like it is a wider audience than Japan itself in some instances, which is wild. But they don't understand, and I knew that this would probably influence the content itself because, well, its audience is more so outside of Japan. But once again, they don't understand the reason why um Westerners seek out Japanese content or Eastern content, because even Korean content is very entertaining. Some of it, like some Korean films. I know a lot. I'm interested in a lot of Korean developers' games that are coming out hopefully shortly. But we're interested in this content because it is different from what we see every day. And to consider slang words, changing them around, and characters' costumes, that one really bothers me because we know that means censorship, and that we're not going to get the authentic version of these games, not just from a translation perspective, but also just visual aesthetic perspective, which is obnoxious because we it's just so obnoxious seeing that because it's so petty. They continue, it is a complex process that has come a long way since the Wild West of the 1980s and 90s, according to one high profile localization team. There were no rules, no industry standards, and the quality of localization could vary greatly from one title to the next, says the Sega of America team who worked on Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, the latest title in the hit series releasing Friday. And yes, I do. Oh man, if you guys watch old school anime and watch it, some of it dubbed even, oh, it varies. Some of it actually isn't so bad, and then some of it is horrendous. There definitely wasn't a a standard back then. But you know what? And even back then we dealt with enormous censorship. Recently a new a new translated version of Angel Cop came out that was a more authentic translation to the original subtitles, which I sought out specifically because it is more genuine to the original work. And that to me is so meaningful. I went out and got the steelbook copy of it because it meant so much to me. It's like, oh man, like finally a very close interpretation, a very close subtitled translation of this what is it, like 6 episode series, which is awesome. I want that authentic version of what I'm watching because I want to know the truth. I don't want to sit here and be lied to and not get the correct context just because it hurts some dickhead's feelings. Like, this is what truly is problematic. And when you're saying you're going to change the authenticity of the Japanese version just because, well, over in the West, they're worried about all these social issues because they're just politically obsessed with every little minute, ridiculous thing here. That in itself means you are depreciating the quality of the localization. Just because you are saying that, you are choosing to depreciate the quality of, if it be the actual visual aesthetic of the game, or the actual translation of the game. You're choosing to make a shittier product by doing this, which apparently they don't understand that. But in the eyes of actual fans, this is how they feel. And it is very obnoxious for you to make these decisions for us. If people don't want to play the game, they simply just won't buy the game. So you might as well just do what the people that will buy your game actually want. But man, we still deal with the nonsense. And they said back then translators faced constraints, including too small text boxes, and sometimes game developers did the job themselves in less than perfect English, which to me is always hilarious when the developers try and do that. I find a certain charm in that, personally. And I'm not at all like, I guess some people may be offended by it. I'm not at all offended. There's a certain charm, like in if you watch Black Lagoon, the Japanese with the subs, when Revi chooses to speak English, it sounds absolutely hilarious. Her Japanese voice actress speaking English, and I find an immense charm to it. And they said it also meant that many games from the era, especially dialogue-heavy ones, never made it out of Japan. Thankfully, the industry, or not so thankfully, thankfully the industry, and perhaps more importantly consumers, have changed a lot since those days. And we are now able to be more faithful to the cultural and emotional content of Japanese games than ever, the Sega team says. So if that's the case, this article is retarded. Like, what are you saying here? You're saying that you are going to change the art just because of the social awarenesses of people in the West being dickheads over everything. You're choosing to change the art, but then you're saying you're now able to be more faithful to the cultural and emotional content of Japanese games than ever before. What does this even mean? Because you're choosing to forsaken your own art for the sake of political nonsense overseas. So you're talking out of two sides of your mouth. Localization is now integral to the design process with international gamers in mind from the start. And that, to me, is you forsaking your own culture. And true fans of this content, if it be like a Dragon, Judgment, Yakuza, Persona, etc., 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 to true fans of these franchises, that is depressing to hear. For us true fans overseas, we don't want to hear this. This is the last thing we want to hear. If you were going to make games specifically from the basis of our culture, we would just spend time playing our culture's video games instead of spending time playing yours. They say one key example is how Japanese game developers dress their heroines. As of the the hashtag Me Too movement changes mindsets. Me Too has not changed any mindsets. It's just caused rage and really just made more problems in America. There is no real change. It's not like, oh my God, they brought down Harvey Weinstein. Well, I'm sure that these losers in Hollywood are still doing some insane, disgusting things. They're just even more secretive about it than ever. As for regular people, we don't care about any of this. And the fact that you are choosing to care about this over in Japan now, oh my God, it's so aggravating. They said as the Me Too movement changes mindsets, which obviously it isn't, says Frank Genti? Frank? I don't know how to say this person's name. Senior localization manager at Japan Games giant Bandai Namco. Clearly somebody that doesn't get it at all. They said, we tell them that the cleavage is a bit too exposed or the skirt is a bit too short, he adds. Before, they weren't very flexible, but they've become more proactive on such subjects, and they really just shouldn't. What you're doing over in Japan, we want the same thing as closely as possible. All of this stuff means the game itself is less flattering. You trying to appeal to the stupid underbelly rules that the West has for people that don't even buy your fucking games to begin with, you following that is a natural turnoff to your longtime fans overseas. They go on, the puzzle of game localization affects the 1980s arcade sensation Pac-Man with a direct translation Puckman, deemed too risky because it could be vandalized. Some top-selling games include Mario, Final Fantasy, and Pokemon Evolved Fantasy Worlds and are not overtly Japanese, offering some flexibility for their adaptation. I mean, back in the day, Dragon Quest was known as Dragon Warrior. I bought Dragon Warrior 3 on the Game Boy Color. Um, and eventually they decided to change it to its natural name that it was known in Japan, Dragon Quest. I mean, if you really want to change those things, you can change those things. Pac-Man is well known just by his visual alone over his name. Yes, it'd be kind of awkward to call him Puckman, and to be honest with you, I would never do that because he's so synonymous as Pac-Man in America. But if you wanted to do that, you should just do that. But the task becomes trickier for series such as Yakuza, which are set in real life locations and use slang from Japan's underworld. Getting it right is important. Around 70% of revenue from recent titles in Yakuza series is from overseas. And that to me is pretty wild. It is crazy that only 30% of the sales of the Yakuza games are in Japan. Wow. At least recently. Yeah, people love the Yakuza franchise out here. They really do. It has a very strong, I don't even want to call it cult following anymore because it isn't really like cult classics. They're really popular now. And I mean, I think that they should use slang terms in Japanese language. Um I recall animes using the term baka quite often, and I know I probably said it terribly, but I believe that's, in reference to calling someone an idiot or something along those lines. So you could use those slang terms even in their own language, and they would catch on as long as, they're used properly. So I don't see why you can't do that. Honestly, if you have like one or two terms that are, Japanese that are inserted into the actual dub, for example, I wouldn't mind that at all. It doesn't bother me, and I'm a person that prefers dub. But they said in recent years, booming interest in manga comics, anime, and wider Japanese culture has made the job easier. And the thing is, the reason why Sega and many, many others in Japan that are probably choosing to make the same mistake, the reason why manga, anime, and such has grown such an insane following overseas is because overseas entertainment has been ruined by the people you're listening to already. If you want to destroy your entertainment as well, continue on this path. I avoid so much Western entertainment because it's shit, because they follow, honestly, the woke ideological bullshit. All of that makes these games and the comics and the television shows and the movies, most of them absolutely insufferable. To me, last year, my favorite film of the year was Godzilla minus one. That is because it didn't have any of the political propaganda nonsense that we're so used to seeing and hearing all the time. If you want to fail, continue with this mindset. You really just have to be yourself. That's all we're at. It's so simple. That's what we're asking. Just be yourself. Something that was pushed when I was a kid. Now it's like, no, you must be all of these things. You must be all of these morally pushed things in society. But the thought of telling someone to be yourself now just seems wrong or bad. Sega, just be yourself. It's sad that I have to say this to a mega corporation, Oh my god. They said people know what ramen is now. We don't need to say noodles anymore, Genti says. He his team at the European headquarters in Bandai Namco has adapted games, including the Tekken fighting series and the smash hit role-playing game Elden Ring, into a dozen languages. The job is as much a cultural change as a linguistic one, says Perry Froggett, localization project manager at Bandai. One player, whichever country they're from, should understand the same thing feel the same thing as someone playing in the original language, he says. I mean, yes. So provide context if need be. Do whatever you can so that people get the genuine understanding of what someone from Japan would. Changing in order to appease, you know, to appease the social abnorms that are being forced to be norms in Western society. That all of that's ridiculous. And now we get to no longer acceptable. And a better understanding of Japanese culture among players means adaptations can be more subtle. The Yakuza series is now called Like a Dragon, closer to the original Japanese. LGBTQ caricatures and sexist cliches have also been axed. So yeah, yeah, you're definitely not getting the true Japanese vision, unfortunately. They say many representations which were normal in Japan in the first Like a Dragon games are no longer acceptable today, says Miyayoshi Yokoyama, the series executive producer. We ask our teams in the United States and Europe to read the game script, and they tell us if they see things that wouldn't be acceptable in their country. Oh my god, this is so obnoxious, man. Changes often focus on alcohol, politics, or religion, Frogget adds, while cultural references points also differ. And they said when there are people dressing in black boots and black leather coats in Europe, that could bring a mind a Nazi uniform. What the? Are you kidding me, bro? Are you kidding me? That is insane. Oh my god. They are becoming extreme. It is sad to say. With global release dates now the norm, these decisions must be made under tight deadlines than before. And despite improved communication between developers and localization teams, challenges remain, especially when translating a game into a language other than English. Efforts have been made to understand the needs of the English-speaking world, Frogget says. But for German, which has longer sentences and other linguistic quirks, localization is sometimes seen as an extra difficulty by design teams. So, they said, even so, Frogget believes that in his mission to create connections to Japanese culture and help Europeans discover in depth while respecting both the game and the player. And this is not possible, especially with how you're going about it. Either the player accepts that they're playing something that is not of their culture, or they're not experiencing that culture. There is no in between. And I don't know, the sooner you get hip to that, the sooner, you'll keep, I guess the sooner you can actually waste less time on bullshit. Really, this is just bullshit at the end of the day. You're just wasting your time and turning off longtime fans of your franchises. And the fact that you're just talking about this so openly, this is obnoxious. But they're aiming for something that is simply just not realistic. And this is the overall problem. And look, if you look at, they got ratioed to hell. Look at this. That ratio is real with this one. And I had to say something. I'm like, you clowns, this is not what gamers in the West want. We want as accurate to source translations as possible without compromise to political garbage. That's what we want. And even here, this individual says in Japanese so that hopefully someone from Japan will read this, I'm sure. They said, ignore the bad advice from localizers. What we are looking for is the most literal translation and a peek into Japanese culture. These people are widely hated, and we hate their corrupt practices. They will ruin your good work. And that I 100% agree with and appreciate them for translating. We got Words of Paradise here. It says, I mean this to be constructive. This was a disgusting article. We in the West want Japanese media to remain authentically Japanese. That's why we love it. Quick making the all too common mistake of believing the majority of Westerners care for ridiculous social sensibilities. It's hurting you more than helping you in the eyes of Western consumers who purchase your products as an escape from these terrible Western ideologies. Quit looking for the Western audience if you're going to be looking in the wrong spot. And I 100% agree. And the fact that your games are appealing more to the Western audience than your own audience in Japan goes to show that you're doing something right. Why would you change it? Why would you castrate it? That's what you're really doing here. And we got Juno here. Stop hiring activists as localizers. That solves 80% of the localization issues right away. Fans of Japanese games don't want them changed to pander to an imaginary Western modern audience. They want the spirit of the Japanese game, but in English. No slang added. So, by the way, this article doesn't even make much sense. The localizers interviewed contradict each other, and I completely agree. Because they say more faithful to cultural and emotional content of Japanese games than ever. And then they talk about the fucking Me Too movement and making sure not to step on toes in the West when it comes to their nonsensical, their nonsensical woke bullshit. And I appreciate Juno for pointing it out. Shout out to him. But yeah. And we got Packer Girl here who says, you realize one of your former translators, localization engineers, has bragged about botched several anime and video game localizations and attacked fans for calling it out, right? And yeah, this person, I do recall them. They are a piece of shit and ruining the good entertainment that we get overseas, sadly. It's so annoying at this point. This really upsets me. It really does. I just want to enjoy my entertainment without being said that they need to look out for my best interest, or you don't. Just give us what we want, which is what you've been doing. Stop changing things to appeal to people you're never going to appeal to. So shout out to Nerdigans for that. But yeah, guys, let me know what you think about this. I'm sad because I feel as though we're definitely going to get some censorship and all that in Persona 3 Remake, which was something I was looking forward to. I don't understand why this has to be so difficult and why people just don't understand, but hey man, here's to hoping that Sega comes to their senses and stop listening to these dickheads that are leading them down the wrong path. But yeah, guys, let me know what you think about this. If you can, like the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel, follow me over on Twitter or Kick if you'd like to continue the conversation. Started a merch shop, so check that out in the description below if you'd like to. If you're a channel member, make sure you join the Discord where we have a bunch of crazies, including myself, just talking nonsense and having fun and just creating a good space that isn't negative. Well, discussing serious issues, but overall we can have an old school gamer space at this point is what I'd like to call it. But yeah, guys, a lot being said, I'm out. Peace.